This is Jacqueline Lukeman with The Real News. We talked in the first segment about Black Alliance for Peace, an organization that is 2 years old that has a mission and a focus on reviving the Black radical anti-war tradition and focus in the United States. We talked in the first segment about NATO, the far reach of US militarism, and specifically what the United States military is doing in Africa that many people in America know little to nothing about. But in this segment, we're going to talk about what all this means to Black people domestically. To continue this conversation, I am here joined today by Netfa Freeman. Netfa is the coordinating committee member for the Black Alliance for Peace. He's also an organizer with Pan-African Community Action, and Vanessa Beck. Vanessa is a member of the Black Alliance for Peace Research Committee and is also on the steering committee for Health Over Profit for Everyone. Thank you both for joining me again for this second segment.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
So you guys gave us a lot of information, a lot of very disturbing information, 800 military bases, US military bases around the world. The expanded role of the United States military in Africa that few people know about, and NATO, the role of NATO. Let me ask you a question about NATO before we go into the domestic focus of the Black radical anti-war sentiment that needs to be revived. When people think about NATO, they usually think about the expansion of NATO in regard to the response of Russia to NATO. Do you think, Netfa, that overshadows what's being done in Africa in regard to NATO?
Yeah, it definitely overshadows. I mean, there's nothing. I think that particularly our people need to understand what our political, economic, and social interests are. Russia is not our enemy. That's not what's happening. They're not killing us in the street every 28 hours. They're not the ones mass incarcerating us. They're not the ones with the big footprint on the African continent. It's the United States with a big footprint, military footprint on the African continent. I don't even know if Russia has, at most they might have one base there. And really what the interests are in terms of, it was strange because they also talk about China a lot. And they make it seem like, and China is very present on the African continent in a lot of ways. Still, it's not a military footprint. It's in, trade agreements and relationships that people could argue are for the interest of China, but so that's what every country, every governments and people do, but they're not bringing militarism. They don't have the same history of overthrowing governments and CIA coup d'etats. Or this is the legacy of the United States in there. And so when they talk about that in the media and people end up focusing on it, we are not really focusing on things that are in our best interest or help us understand that at all. And we don't understand the legacy and the nature of colonialism. Not only that it applies to neocolonialism, all the trappings of independence, but with all of the same political and economic relationships and interests and power relations intact. That's known as neocolonialism. And it exists on the continent of Africa and also applies to us as Black people in the United States.
So that's a great segue into what I'm going to ask you, Vanessa. Why should anyone in the United States care about all of this information you've just given us about the expansion of the United States military state? But why should Black people care in particular, especially Black people in the United States? Why should Black people in Baltimore be concerned about what the United States military is doing in Africa?
Right. Very, very important question. So while the United States military was ramping up militarization in Africa, simultaneously, the Obama administration was ramping up militarization right here of colonized, Black and poor working class neighborhoods in the United States. And this involves even using some of the very same weapons and the very same tactics and techniques to kind of squash any kind of uprisings that occur. One thing I like to look at is life expectancy. Like, let's take the Upton Druid Hills neighborhood in Baltimore. So, and compare that to life expectancy in the wealthy white Roland Park area. In Roland Park, if you're lucky enough to be living there, your life expectancy is 84, whereas in Upton, it is 68. And that is on par with nations that the United States occupies and bombs. It's more on par with that than it is the rest of the United States.
So we don't have a situation in Druid Hill where the United States is dropping bombs on the neighborhood, right? There's no one drone bombing Druid Hill. So how is American militarism abroad affecting the life expectancy of people in poor and especially poor Black neighborhoods? Where's the connection?
Right. Well, there is, militarization is not only about dropping bombs. It is also the threat of having militarized police and surveillance in a community. There are two programs domestically, in particular, that are responsible for this, occupied. I was going to say occupied feeling, but it's a reality, occupied reality in our neighborhoods. There's the 1033 program, which allows any kind of local police to obtain military weapons from the Pentagon at reduced rates or for free. And this even applies to school districts, and campus police can get these weapons. And then we also have what has been named the Deadly Exchange Program, which is a police exchange between U.S. police and Israeli police, where they trade tactics and techniques. Now, Israeli police, is known to be one of the most violent occupying police forces that there is. And Israeli police, meanwhile, recognize that United States police are a terrorizing force on Black people domestically. So there's this intensification of militarization that we particularly see, when Black people are uprising here over shootings or over conditions in their neighborhoods. Then it is very much out in the open. But this affects us, just the daily stress of living under these conditions affects our health even.
So under the 1033 program in particular, I'm recalling images from Ferguson, Missouri. I'm recalling images from right here in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray uprising, where you see police officers in what look like militarized vehicles, like tanks. So you're saying that they really do come from the Department of Defense. And not only can police departments, but you also said, Vanessa, campus police and school police, as in public school police, can obtain the same type of materials.
Yes. Armored vehicles, grenades, rifles, automatic weapons, and any of these kinds of military weapons are obtainable.
So, Netfa, what does Black Alliance for Peace do in order to combat these kinds of programs and also to educate and mobilize people to understand why they have to be aware of them and why they have to be opposed? What campaigns does Black Alliance for Peace have that people can be joined with?
So three major campaigns. The first one was the coalition is participating in the coalition to close U.S. military bases around the world, and then we've done that since the coalition. There's a lot of direct action and things like that. The two main campaigns that are pretty much, I don't even know if it's actually kind of one campaign, but they're two things. We see them as one, but two components to it. Is first, the U.S. out of Africa shut down AFRICOM, where in both of these we're using petition drives, direct teach-ins, things like that, going on, doing media, doing propaganda work in terms of, well, people, I use the term propaganda work. I know people might not be used to it that way, but it's really just passing around information, right, for a particular purpose.
Yes.
But it becomes as a, word, charged word. But we pass out information about it. We do media about it. We do going on like we went on the Hill. So we're trying to get other policymakers to understand and maybe set some resolutions or legislation or whatever around these kind of things, briefings like the one we're going to try to do a briefing on the Hill, get the policymakers to do a briefing on the Hill about the impact of AFRICOM. And so we want all the withdrawal of all U.S. military presence out of the continent, and then for there to be this briefing that talks about the impact of it. And then that I mentioned, the other side of the domestic side is no compromise, no retreat.
Yes.
Can you tell me the rest of the looking at
defeat the war against African Black people in the United States.
In the United States. And so those are the two things. And then one part of this campaign has to be, and we actually have both organization members and individual members. So we want organizations, Black organizations that want to take up this call to join the Black Alliance for Peace, and so we can coordinate our activities around these things. One is to get the policymakers to have an unequivocal position on what AFRICOM, militarism in our communities, the 1033 program, AFRICOM, to not be able, because right now they're not even talking about it. You would think it's just not, it doesn't even exist. We had, in fact, just recently, there was a bill, a few years ago, a bill by Grayson to repeal 1033 program. And a lot of the the Congressional Black Caucus members or the Black representatives voted against that bill. And right now they don't even talk about AFRICOM. They act like they don't even know it exists. And so we want to change that.
So how do people get connected with Black Alliance for Peace?
Well, let me say, particularly if you are an individual or part of an organization who wants to get involved with the domestic campaign against militarism and imperialism, you can go to blackallianceforpeace.com/no compromise, no retreat. And we'll keep you informed as we're rolling out this campaign. We're in the process of talking with other organizations so that we can build a national steering committee to really ramp up the organizing on these issues. And then info@blackallianceforpeace.com. Is our email address if you generally want to get connected. And our website, of course, blackallianceforpeace.com. And shout out if you live in Baltimore. We're building local alliances, and I'm helping to organize one in Baltimore. So also email us at the info address.
Netfa Freeman, Vanessa Beck, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this issue that is not given enough attention in the United States in general, but particularly in Black communities. We will continue to have this conversation about why we need to be much more strenuously anti-war in the United States as so-called progressives, certainly so-called leftists, definitely so-called Americans. We must continue this conversation. If we want peace, we have to fight for it. This is Jacqueline Luqman with The Real News in Baltimore.